Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Contour Community Meeting. Today is Tuesday, January 19th, 2021, and we're going to start with what we've been working on and then dive into some discussion topics. First up, we have Steve K.
Yeah, I mentioned this last week, but I've been working on the local rate limiting code. We haven't actually merged the design doc for overall rate limiting yet, but I think it's close, and local rate limiting is the less controversial of the two forms of it. So I just went ahead and did a bunch of the coding. I've been testing it. Things are looking pretty good. I got a few more comments from Sanjay today, so thanks for the review there. And I have a few things to address, one or two things to address, but definitely hoping to get this into the 1.12 release.
Yeah, that's looking really good, Steve. I'll give it a review today before I'm away for a couple of days.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. I think I'm next up.
Yep.
So yeah, if you could bring up the first design PR. I've been working on designing out how Contour is going to interact with the new service APIs. This PR is still work in progress because it's still under heavy edit. But I did want to talk a little bit about the model that this PR is using. This PR is using and so I would encourage you, if you are at all interested in service APIs, to go and have a read of this and please give me comments on it. The service APIs is a very large feature service and there's a lot to do. And we, in order to keep Contour tightly focused on what we want it to do, we're only picking a subset of the service APIs to support. So that subset is that Contour is going to stay an ingress controller. It's going to do HTTP routes and TLS routes. Not TCP routes or UDP routes. And the other thing that's important is that Contour, the controller, will not do any provisioning of gateways. So in the cluster APIs, you have gateway classes that contain gateways. Gateways contain inside them listeners, and then the listeners refer to routes of various types: HTTP routes, TLS routes, TCP routes, UDP routes, plus whatever other routes you can come up with. So Contour will watch gateways, but not create them. It will read gateways only, and then use those gateways to find HTTP routes or TLS routes and create Envoy config based on them. That is a extremely short summary of what is a much more complicated thing. But the key parts there is that Contour, the controller, does not create anything. The operator does create things, which Daniel will hopefully have a minute to talk about in a sec. And because of that, there's a sort of a division of responsibility that the controller doesn't create anything. It just reads and then makes Envoy config the same as we do right now. As an adjunct to that, and then Jonas, if you could pick up the next link. As part of this, one of the things that I've needed to do is, as part of the gateway, gateways have listeners. Listeners can request an arbitrary port be created on the gateway. In Contour's case, the gateway represents both the Contour deployment and the envoys. So a gateway that's being created is requesting ports be opened on the envoys. Right now, we don't let you do that. We only let you create a single insecure port, which is HTTP only, and a single secure port, which is TLS only. That can be either HTTPS, meaning terminated, or TLS, which means forwarded through. I'm proposing in this PR to change this semantics around a little bit and make it possible that you can expose additional ports on top of the existing insecure and secure port, which will mean that you can add extra HTTP or HTTPS/TLS ports. There's a few features there. There's 3 issues there that I've managed to find that where people have asked for this similar functionality. So people have already asked for this for HTTP proxy. The idea for implementing this is that we will build this functionality for HTTP proxy first, and then as we build out the service APIs functionality, we'll be able to make use of that same functionality. I can't finish the service APIs design without a decision here. It's possible to do service APIs without doing this, but I think that it would be a much worse experience. So both of these are pretty important. I think that the service APIs is a vital feature for the future of Contour. And so it's really important that we get this design right. So these are both really important design PRs. And they both have impacts on the operator's design PR, which I will seamlessly transition into and hand over to Daniel. Are you here, Daniel?
Yeah, I am. And before we get into the operator side of things, can we just go back to
sure.
that previous PR? Just wanted to get make sure my understanding is correct. I did get a chance to read through.
So you
Jonas,
meant
not this one?
Yeah.
The listeners, the multiple listeners
Yep.
PR. But just to make sure I understood correctly, so when a gateway defines multiple listeners, different ports, those would equate to container ports for Envoy. Is that correct?
No, that's actually one thing that I have had to make very clear. I've made clearer in the design. Those also probably not is actually a better answer. In the example or the operator installation, there's an Envoy service that actually does port translation from the 8080 and 8443 that the Envoys actually see to 80 and 443 respectively. The port that you specify in the gateway would need to be the one that's on the outside of the service. I have been pretty clear. That was one thing that I needed to sit down and be very thoughtful about in the actual proposal, but I have written that out in the proposal. Yeah. In the event that you end up using a deployment of Envoy that does not have a service, we'll need to figure out some way to just have a way to say, hey, there's no service. Whatever ports you specify should be provisioned as ports on Envoy. But there's a tight coupling there between what Contour the controller needs to do and what the operator needs to do to provision, if it's provisioning those things. Another point that I didn't make actually very clearly is that one of the reasons I want to do this separation of responsibilities is that Contour the controller is not going to care about how the gateway gets provisioned, only that the gateway has properties that mean it is able to serve it. So if you provision a gateway in any other way, you can still use Contour as the sort of route handler or ingress controller, which is what it currently is called.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. So, an Envoy container will always just have two ports, and a secure and an insecure port, and the service. Is there always going to be? You say at least. So what I was thinking was like, okay, like if a gateway listener is kind of associated to a service and a service port, that we could have multiple. I guess it would be multiple port definitions for the Envoy service that maps either to the secure port or the insecure port of the Envoy container, based on whether that port definition in the gateway is of protocol type HTTP or type HTTPS.
That's true. I think the problem there is that when you do that, you end up sharing a connection manager, an Envoy connection manager with whatever else is on this insecure or secure port. People specifically want to be able to do, want to be able to have like an extra TCP port that doesn't go through the same connection manager. So you can say, all things that go on this port, definitely there's only effectively a default service for that, and everything from that port goes to this service. So in that case, what the way the flow for the operator will need to work, and again, I haven't put this in the PR yet, is that the gateway will need to sort of have a request for ports 80 and 443, say, and they will, we will need to just probably have a convention around which ones are the default insecure and insecure ports, probably just the first one, and then any other ports of type HTTP or HTTPS that are different to those port numbers are not mergeable in service APIs terms, and so should, as far as the operator is concerned, create extra ports on the service that point to the same port on the Envoy container. And then when in the controller, when we program Envoy, we say, hey, just take this port is not one of the special ports. We just take it and ask Envoy to please listen on that port. Obviously, there are caveats around that. If you ask for a port below 1024 and you're not running as root, then you're going to be out of luck. Envoy will not be able to bind to that port. So there's a few caveats there, but I think overall, and which I haven't fully documented yet in the proposal, but I think overall, the point of this is just to sort of enable some level of functionality. And that's what I'm aiming to do there. But this is why it's taken me a while to get this stuff done, is that there are so many small edge cases and little fiddly bits that can trip you up that you got to think about. Steve Sloka.
So is the goal here to have like stevesloka.com run on port 80 and then nickyoung.com run on port 9004 and then stevechris.com running on 8022?
That's what people have asked for. Yeah, is to be able to have extra things. I mean, I think a lot of the time what people want is they actually, they want to be able to do like TLS forwarding for a different protocol that's not the thing that they want to have it on a completely separate port as well, which you can do. This.
I'm just trying to understand the use case, because we've never ever had anything other than insecure. So then I guess why now? Like
why now is just because it's part of the gateway contract. It's part of the gateway contract that you can request.
But we're not
an arbitrary
TCP
number of ports.
UDP are part of that spec as well. We're saying no to that.
But
we can say no to this too. That's why I'm trying to understand what's the what's the motivation to spend all this time on it when it's I don't know. I guess I haven't heard folks ask for that. That's why I was kind of interested about it.
Yeah, so I mean, the motivation is like there have been folks ask for it, and there's not been heaps and heaps and heaps, but there absolutely have been folks ask for, please, I want to be able to forward, this random high port to some other HTTP service, which again seems weird to me, but sure, whatever. And the I wanted to spend some time thinking about this to see how big a deal it would be. I think it's actually pretty valid for us to be like, no, we don't want to do this. We're only going to allow 2 ports, one HTTP and one HTTPS. That would mean that our gateways have like a slight difference. Like, if you ask for more than 2 ports, then you're going to get, hey, no, sorry, we can't do that. If it's not mergeable, that's okay. That's part of as you say, that is part of the Service API spec. But I wanted to, on a naive reading of the Service APIs, I would expect as a person who is, creating a gateway that I could do something like this. And I wanted to say, hey, if we're going to be able to add extra listeners, then this would be how we would do it. And I needed to spend some time thinking about the other thing that's really relevant here is about Contour currently automatically will give you a insecure to secure redirect if you don't jump through a couple of hoops. So basically, if you create a HTTPS vhost and you're exposing your site via HTTPS, by default, Contour will give you a HTTP redirect. So if you go to HTTP stevesloka.com, you will get redirected to https.stevesloka.com. And there's nothing you need to do. It's just done for you, because we assumed that most people probably want that you just want that redirect. You don't want people to be using it unless you really need it. And if you really need it, there are escape hatches in there. So I wanted to be able to keep that, and it was tricky to figure out the right way to do that in the service APIs. And so I thought, well, maybe the right thing to do is to just expose a little bit more functionality. I'm not 100% wedded to it. Like, as I said, I spent a while thinking about this, but I'd be 100% okay if the consensus of the community is, no, we shouldn't worry about that. We should just go ahead with 2 ports.
No, I think maybe some use cases would help me understand it. I could see folks wanting to say like, hey, domain A, listens on these 2 ports for this external load balancer, and this other domain listens on a different load balancer, in my cloud provider or something, so I can, manage the traffic coming in from different places or something. But that's not what we're talking about here, right? Because that would mean multiple services all pointing to Envoy, which is not, from my understanding, is not what this is, right? This is just having more ports on the same external load balancer, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, but also this lets you do, so the 2 other requests that I've seen are, there's one that's actually a bug. That's if you change the secure port away from 443, when Contour generates you the redirect, it doesn't generate the redirect properly to have the port number in it. that is a bug that we should just fix. But when I was thinking about that, I was thinking about like, well, how do we know what port to put in there? It's actually surprisingly tricky. And so that's another place where that came from. The other one is there's the 2922 issue that's linked there, Jonas. That's basically people say, hey, I want to be able to expose MongoDB using the TLS forwarding, but not have it share the port with HTTPS. I want to do a TLS termination and TLS pass through. Actually, I think they wanted. This does doing the multiple listeners thing does allow you to do that. And the other thing that the other problem with it, in my view, is that it does allow you to do some really basic layer 4 TCP stuff, because you can expose a insecure port and use a TCP proxy to forward all the TCP that shows up there to somewhere else. I don't think it's proper TCP load balancing at all, because there's a lot of stuff you don't get, but it'll hit but I just want this really basic thing use case. That there's a thing that will interact there with what Chad wants to talk about later. Yeah, so please, comments on the PRs, very welcome. If there's clarification that's needed on there, please do. If you want to, I am more than willing to question the whole point of the PR. That's 100% fine. Like I said, I'd be okay with, I'd be 100% okay with saying, no, this is probably not what we want to do. If we do, then it just means that the service API's implementation, there's flow-on effects there, and there's flow-on effects back to the operator. So please have a look at those videos.
I understand correctly.
Yep.
So we're saying that Contour, the controller, could, or I guess it's Envoy, being managed by Contour, could potentially have more than just the secure and insecure listener on 80 and 443. Yes. We could have multiple listeners, and then those, let's say it's half a dozen listeners with different ports, would need to map to different container ports and potentially tied to different, well, I guess the same Envoy service, but just different port definitions within
that service. Yes. Yeah. So
okay.
As far as
I'm following you.
As far as the operator is concerned, that would be the important part, right? There's a secure port, an insecure port, and then if there's any other ports in the gateway definition, then you need to edit the service object with those extra ports so that traffic can get to them.
So now it makes sense why the network publishing API for the Contour operator is on pause, because currently the way that API is constructed, there's basically two port definitions, the HTTP port and the HTTPS port. And what we're now talking about is actually just saying ports.
Exactly.
Really, gotcha. Okay, I gotcha.
There are two special ports still. There's an insecure and a secure port that are special, in that if you create a listener, if you create a virtual host on the secure port, then Contour will still create you a redirect automatically. So there are.
So there are two special ports.
Yes.
I gotcha. So this is additive then, saying, okay, these are like additional ports.
Exactly. Okay. Yes, that is exactly the point of it. And that's what I was aiming for, is is there a way that we could do that and still have the good bits, but then have this extra bit that you can use if you need to? I don't think a lot of people will need to use it, but the people who do need to use it will really need to use it. And so, it's worth spending a bit of time thinking about now to make sure that we don't lock ourselves into something that we can't change later.
Gotcha. No, that all makes sense.
Yep. Cool. So I guess the next thing that we need to talk about is the operator service APIs design. Daniel, over to you. Where's this at? I haven't had a chance to review it again for a little while because I've been busy with my ones. I have had a bit of a look over it, but I think we're roughly in harmony after the last maintainer catch up we had.
Yeah, I think last week helped out a great deal. I did do some updates to the design doc from the feedback from the maintainers meeting. I think it's in pretty good spot. So yeah, I think it just comes down to making sure that all maintainers are on board with the proposed design.
Yeah, I think
yeah, I don't really.
I think in broad strokes, I'm obviously on board. I need to sit down and actually go through the document and make sure that we haven't accidentally worked at cross purposes. But I think having the division of responsibilities be the operator provisions the gateway, and then the controller handles the routes, makes it nice and makes it pretty clean.
Yeah,
and it makes it much easier to keep it separate, as long as we both agree on what a gateway means.
Yep.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to say about the service APIs, designs and stuff? As I said, PR, like comments on the PRs are extremely welcome. Please, if you have thoughts about it, I would really appreciate them. Yeah, because this one's pretty tough. Like it's pretty tough to make sure that we're doing this in the right way. But if not, then we should probably move on to the next thing. Thanks, Steve. Yes, it's probably relevant as well. I am actually going to be out of the office for 2 days. For the next 2 days, so I won't be responding to much for the rest of the week. Sanjay.
This could probably just be a PR comment, but I was just thinking about how do conflicting listeners who ask for HTTP or HTTPS on the special dynamic ports work. I guess with HTTP proxy, do we already validate that you're not already not listening? Oh, the port field will be a new thing, so it'll be.
Yeah, so the port field will be a new thing, but also in the service APIs, there's a concept of like mergeable listeners. And so by default, if you ask for like the same port number, protocol, and a different host name, then your listener is mergeable. Right. So and so there's that's part of what has been really tricky is sort of sitting down and thinking through all the possible use cases for listeners and trying to figure out what are the rules for merging versus non-merging, and which things create a conflict and which don't. And so that's, I've got a list of rules down there, and I would very much appreciate other people looking at them, because I started to go cross-eyed after like looking at them a lot and trying to think of every possible permutation, but I really could use some other eyes on it.
And I guess, do we want to support the same mergeability on HTTP proxies as well?
No. So HTTP proxies contract is different. It's for HTTP proxy, the entire design of HTTP proxy is that a root HTTP proxy is 100% not mergeable. If two HTTP proxies define the same vhost, that is a conflict. And that behavior is locked behind a sort of V1 guarantee. So we can't mess with that. I am proposing in the multiple listeners thing that we backport the port functionality to HTTP proxy and add a port field into the virtual host, but there's some specification in there about what I think we should do there. Again, like consider that like, it's a work in progress PR. I'm 100% okay if the work that ends up being delivered there is that we evaluated this thing and it was not a good idea and we reject it. That's fine.
All right. We only have a few minutes left. I want to make sure that Chad can talk about his discussion topic.
Yes. Yeah, please go, Chad.
No, actually, I mean, I'm trying to digest a little bit, Nick. I'm subscribed to the 2922 that you're talking about here, trying to kind of understand what they're asking for versus kind of, so our UDP use case would be with like streaming video essentially.
Right.
And so one of the things, and then we just started this conversation today, actually. So I'm starting to dig into this. I was looking at Envoy's UDP supports, trying to understand a little bit, and then just kind of like looking at what you're doing here. So I'm still kind of in processing mode a little bit.
So the thing I can give you, I want to give you the sort of policy statement that it's taking me a while to work out, but this is that pretty much what I said in the Slack channel. The intent for Contour is that it stays like a layer 7 ingress controller, that it doesn't pick up like full layer 4 load balancing functionality. There's actually a huge can of worms in doing like proper layer 4 stuff. There's a lot of things that people expect as part of a layer 4 load balancer that Contour, like it's impossible for Contour to deliver. And so any layer 4 support, that anything that Contour delivers, Contour being the broader Contour project, not the Contour controller, will be actually limited in some slightly surprising ways. They were surprising to me when I started thinking about it. So in order to make sure that we don't impact the sort of maintainability of the core Contour controller, that is Project Contour / Contour, I have made the call that I don't want the TCP and UDP stuff to be built in there. I think I've got agreement from Alex as the PM for the net on that one. And I think the reasoning for that is just to keep the surface area of the controller minimal for now. I want to really understand the use cases that people want to hit with UDP. It's like we have had other requests for UDP, but I think there's a lot of complexity around when you do UDP. Some of the protocols are much more picky about the rewriting that you have to do as part of proxying the UDP connection. Like part of the Envoy UDP proxying is that you don't get the original four tuple back to the service that actually does the thing. If that, for some things that really matters, and that means that it's useless. But for other things it doesn't. And so that's why it's really important to understand the exact use cases that people are trying to hit. And lastly, the other thing is that you got to be careful when you're doing UDP because it's not actually connection oriented. The only way you can do pseudo connections for doing a proxy and maintaining a session for the packets so you don't have to make like routing decisions on every packet is via a 4-tuple. And the only way you can get rid of those sessions when they expire is via a timeout. And so you have to be very careful about timeouts and stuff like that, so you don't run out of sessions in your proxy or your firewall or whatever. Classic UDP forwarding problem, when you're running a proxy that could possibly have connection pools shared between a shared HTTP thing and then a UDP thing as well. I just think it's a ticket for trouble. There's a lot of unknowns there. There's a lot of stuff there, and we need to be really careful about it and not just chuck it in there because Envoy can do it, if you see what I'm saying.
Sure. Well, quick question though. So isn't Contour though, like as the project you're sitting, isn't it kind of bounded by the configs that it can send to Envoy, right? So I mean, essentially
Yes.
it's kind of acting as a middle layer, right?
Yes, it is a control plane for Envoy, yes. Right. And so there's a limited set of things it can even accomplish. It's not possible for it to reach into your layer 3 infrastructure and have set up BGP peering for your envoys, right? Or create VIPs or something like that, right? Some of that lower level stuff that's much more important when you start talking about layer 4 load balancing functionality. You need to have some of those things a lot of time to sort of make things work the way people expect them to. Could we chuck something in there that would let you define a listener of type UDP that just took things that arrived on a port and forward them onto a service? We could, but the thing that I worry about is that it won't meet the use case that people actually want because of there being lots and lots of caveats. And it's going to be tricky to write the caveats down, tricky to explain the caveats to people. If we just have a UDP forwarding checkbox, then people may bring their own expectations about what that means. And so that's why it may sound like I'm being unnecessarily cautious, but that's why I'm being cautious, is because it's really important to just be careful with UDP, because UDP means so many different things to so many people. Management of the use cases is really important. I know it's probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but
I have more to learn. All right. So, but I'd love to provide some value to you as you're kind of discovering this. I mean, it may be starting off from like an architectural perspective. The way I look at this is like, okay, well, now do I look at like, I've essentially got 2 Contour deployments, one for my layer 7 and one for my UDP. And I've got 2 control planes kind of managing those 2 different things on the same Envoy layer.
So the restriction is that you can't have more than one control plane for Envoy. That's a hard Envoy requirement.
Okay.
So you in order to have 2 if you have a Contour ingress controller and some other thing, then you would need to have 2 Envoy deployments. That probably works out as a net win in the end for operability, I think, because the layer 4 requirements are often very different to the layer 7 ones. Okay. So again, that's what I mean by it really comes down to the exact use cases you're trying to hit. So one of the reasons that people often ask for UDP is they're like, oh, I want to be able to do SIP forwarding to forward voice, to forward voice calls. Yeah. But some of this, SIP forwarding is a whole different kettle of worms, right? Or kettle of fish, bag of worms.
I mean, I think like what we're looking at right now is because it's not what we're looking at right now, because it's not supported by Contour, is actually doing like an Nginx deployment. So we're going to have like the Envoy is like a daemon set with Contour, and the Nginx with config maps for our UDP.
Yeah.
And I think
I completely acknowledge that's not ideal. I would love to be able to do something, but like I said, I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for as many people as possible.
Yeah, but I'm saying I think what you're talking about, your solution is kind of like that. So instead of Nginx, we just have another Envoy deployment on a different set of ports.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to provide some feedback and brainstorm with you on that. So thanks.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Please feel free to hit me up in Slack and we can set up a time to talk in more detail about it if you like.
Yeah, I would just echo that. We agree. I agree with Nick on all accounts. But we have heard of customers asking for UDP, so I'd love to learn more about the specific type of traffic from you, Chad, and then we can talk about this.
Absolutely.
It's not an immediate roadmap item.
I love being able to guinea pig, so anytime I can put that to the test, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Chad.
There is one more one more short item that I need to hit. This is a bit of a mea culpa for me. Alex is Contour's PM. He also works for VMware, same as a few of us. When we changed over from Michael to Alex, we did what we had done in the past when we changed product managers. And just added Alex to the maintainer team. However, we forgot that as a CNCF project, we now have responsibilities around process about doing that, and we didn't do the process. So this is a mea culpa saying, I'm sorry, that's on me. We did not do the process properly. I will open a issue in the community repo, which is the way that we're supposed to have the maintainers vote on whether or not there needs to be a supermajority of maintainers confirm that someone is going to be a maintainer. So we will do that now and make sure that the process is wrapped up. I want to get better at this because I would like to be able to bring on, extra maintainers.
Sounds good, Nick. I think we just lost Nick as well. So on that note, thank you everyone for joining. Have a fantastic rest of the week, and we'll see you all next week.
Hi, y'all. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.